The Galactic Council's chamber was filled with a quiet hum as delegates from across the galaxy gathered. The chamber was massive, suspended in the vacuum of space, surrounded by the light of distant stars. It was a place where the fate of countless civilizations was decided. This was where the most important decisions in the galaxy were made, and today, the Council had gathered for a momentous meeting. At the center of the room, seated at the grand table, was Captain Elias Carter, Earth's Envoy. He had traveled across the stars to represent humanity, but he didn't feel like a representative of the human race today. He felt like a prisoner caught in a game of politics that was far beyond his control. The Council's members were a diverse group, beings from many different worlds, each with their own agendas. Some were tall, with skin made of shimmering metal. Others were small and insect-like, their antennae twitching as they spoke. There were humanoid species, and then there were others whose forms defied imagination. Despite their differences, they were united in one goal: to maintain order in the galaxy. And right now they were focused on Earth. A tense silence filled the chamber. Captain Carter shifted in his seat, trying to calm his nerves. He knew that Earth was on trial, and he was the one who had to defend it. For weeks, the Council had been discussing Earth's actions in the galaxy. Some of the delegates had called Earth's military actions reckless and aggressive. Others, however, believed that humanity's actions were justified. After all, Earth had been forced to defend itself from larger, more powerful species. Captain Carter had tried his best to explain that humanity was still learning how to navigate the vast and dangerous galaxy. They were a young species, and their military might was nothing compared to the long-established empires of the galaxy. But the other delegates didn't see it that way. The leader of the Council, a tall, silver-skinned being named High Chancellor Voss, called the meeting to order. He stood at the head of the table, his piercing eyes scanning the room. Voss had always been a fair leader, but today, his expression was harder than usual. His tone was colder, more formal. "We are gathered today to discuss the actions of Earth," Voss began. "As you know, humanity has made several choices that have affected the stability of the galaxy. The question before us is simple. Do we allow Earth to continue its expansion in the galaxy, or do we take measures to stop it?" The room was silent as the Council members exchanged glances. Some nodded in agreement with the High Chancellor's words. Others looked uneasy, unsure of where the conversation was headed. Captain Carter's heart began to race. He had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. He could feel the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He was the one representing Earth, and if the Council voted to take action against humanity, the consequences would be devastating. Voss continued, "We have debated this issue at length, and now it is time to make a decision. It is clear that Earth's actions cannot go unpunished. If humanity is to continue its existence in the galaxy, there must be a price to pay." A murmur rippled through the room. Carter could feel the eyes of the Council members on him. He clenched his fists, trying to maintain his composure. He had one chance to change their minds, one chance to convince them that humanity deserved to survive. He stood up, his voice calm but filled with determination. "I understand that Earth's actions have been seen as a threat, but we are not the monsters you think we are. We are simply a species trying to survive in a galaxy full of dangers. We don't seek war, we seek peace. We are willing to make compromises, to change our ways if given the chance." There was a pause as the delegates listened intently. Some seemed moved by his words, but others remained unmoved, their expressions cold. A delegate from a distant warlike planet, a hulking creature with a fierce gaze, spoke up. "Peace. Your kind does not know peace. Earth's actions have already shown us that your species only understands force. How can we trust you?" Captain Carter's mind raced. This was it, the moment that could define the future of Earth. "We are learning," he said, his voice steady. "We have made mistakes, yes, but we are not the same as we were before. We are evolving. We want to be part of this galaxy, not its enemy." Another delegate, a humanoid with long flowing hair and an air of calm, spoke next. "I believe in what the captain says. Earth is a young species, and their actions, while misguided, are not entirely without merit. Perhaps we should give them time to prove themselves. Captain Carter held his breath, hoping this would sway the room. But the warlike delegate wasn't finished. Enough. You speak of time, but we do not have the luxury of time. Earth has shown that it will act on its own terms, without regard for the rest of us. The time for debate is over. High Chancellor Voss raised his hand, calling for silence. I have heard enough. It is time for a vote. Captain Carter's stomach sank as he sat back down. He had done all he could, but it seemed it wouldn't be enough. The vote was cast, and the result was clear. Earth's actions would be punished. Voss turned to Captain Carter, his face stern. The Galactic Council has spoken. You are hereby sentenced. The envoy of Earth is to be executed for your actions. Let this serve as a warning to your people. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Captain Carter's heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment, the room seemed to blur around him. The decision had been made. There was no going back now. But as he was escorted from the room, something strange happened. Outside, the stars that had once shone brightly now seemed to flicker. A dark cloud began to form in the sky, growing larger with each passing second. It was as if the universe itself had reacted to the Council's decision. Captain Carter couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something dark and powerful was coming, and it was connected to the death sentence hanging over him. The galaxy had just entered a new chapter, one that would change everything. And that was just the beginning of the story. As Captain Elias Carter was led away from the Galactic Council's chamber, the weight of the decision that had been made against him seemed almost unbearable. His hands were cuffed, his steps slow and heavy. He could hear the murmurs of the council members behind him, but the words felt distant, muffled, like they were coming from a far-off world. The corridors of the council's floating station were silent, eerily so. Normally, the place was alive with the voices of delegates, the hum of energy systems, and the occasional chatter of passing ships. But now the entire station felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Captain Carter tried to focus on the next steps, to prepare for what was to come, but his mind kept circling back to the same thought. How had things gotten this bad? He was no longer just an envoy. He was a symbol of humanity's failure in the eyes of the galaxy. His execution would mark the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with darkness and uncertainty. As they reached the execution chamber, a strange feeling washed over him. He could sense it in the air, in the way the station seemed to hum differently, as though something was stirring deep within the very walls of the station itself. The usual cold, metallic chill of the station had grown even colder. The hum of the energy systems had turned into a low, unsettling growl. "Get in," one of the guards said, his voice gruff and without emotion. Captain Carter didn't resist. He stepped into the chamber, his heart pounding in his chest. The chamber was sterile, clinical, its walls made of polished metal and reinforced glass. A small observation window was embedded into the wall, through which a few high-ranking council members would watch his final moments. It was cold and impersonal, and it sent a chill running down his spine. He didn't have much time to think before the guards turned him toward the center of the room, where a chair with restraints awaited him. But before they could reach him, something unexpected happened. A sudden, intense tremor shook the entire station. The lights flickered, and the hum of the energy systems grew louder, almost deafening. The tremor lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to throw everyone off balance. The guards stumbled back, momentarily distracted. Captain Carter's heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. The tremors stopped as quickly as they had begun, but a deep, unnatural silence filled the room. The lights dimmed, casting long, eerie shadows across the cold floor. For a moment, the silence seemed to stretch on forever. Even the guards appeared unsettled, glancing nervously at each other. And then something else happened. Outside the chamber, through the large observation windows, the stars in the distance flickered. It wasn't just a normal shift in the light. No, this was different. It was as though the stars themselves were dimming, one by one, as if something was blocking their light. Captain Carter's heart raced as he watched in disbelief. The stars weren't just fading, they were being swallowed by a growing darkness. It was as though the galaxy itself was being engulfed in shadows, and the darkness was moving toward the station. The guards didn't notice at first, too focused on their orders to restrain him, but Carter couldn't take his eyes off the windows. The sight was unlike anything he had ever seen. The darkness seemed to pulse like a living thing, its edges moving in erratic patterns. It was almost as if something from beyond the galaxy was approaching, something ancient and powerful. As the stars disappeared one by one, the station itself seemed to shake again. This time, the tremors were far more intense. The entire structure groaned, its metal bones creaking as though they were being bent and twisted. The guards, now panicking, rushed to the control panels, their hands shaking as they tried to stabilize the station. But nothing seemed to work. Captain Carter could feel the fear in the air. It wasn't just the fear of the execution anymore. It was a sense of impending doom. Something far bigger than any of them was coming. The darkness outside was no longer just a strange phenomenon. It was a warning. And as the last of the stars faded into the blackness, Captain Carter realized something even more terrifying. This wasn't just the end of his life. This was the beginning of something far worse. The guards' panic grew as the tremors became more violent. They were shouting now, trying to make sense of what was happening. But there was no understanding this. No logic could explain what was unfolding outside. Through the observation window, Captain Carter could see the outline of a massive shape beginning to emerge from the dark void. It was huge, its silhouette barely visible against the vast blackness that was swallowing everything in its path. The station shuddered violently again, throwing everyone off balance. A voice crackled through the intercom. "This is Commander Xelgar of the Galactic Fleet. All personnel prepare for immediate evacuation. The station is under attack. I repeat, the station is under attack." Captain Carter's pulse quickened. An attack? But by who? The darkness outside wasn't like anything he had ever encountered. There was no ship, no fleet, no force that could create something like this. This was something otherworldly. The guards finally turned to him, their expressions filled with terror. "What is happening?" one of them demanded. Captain Carter, his face pale and his mind racing, could only manage a whisper. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's here because of me." As the blackness closed in around the station, it became clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The execution had been halted, but it no longer mattered. The galaxy was no longer concerned with a single human envoy. Something far darker had awoken, and it was coming for everyone. And as the last star disappeared from the sky, Captain Carter knew that the galaxy's fate, and Earth's survival, now depended on something far beyond anything he could comprehend. The war that was about to begin wasn't one of mere politics or diplomacy. It was a war for survival against a force that had no mercy. The sky had turned dark, and with it, the galaxy's future had been sealed. The darkness outside the station deepened, spreading like an inescapable tide. The stars that had once lit the endless expanse of space were now gone, swallowed by an unnatural shadow that seemed to pulse with an eerie life of its own. Captain Elias Carter stood motionless, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind racing. The station around him trembled with each violent aftershock, the metal walls groaning as though in pain. The once bustling station, where debates and decisions had shaped the fate of the galaxy, now felt like a tomb. The guards were in a state of complete panic. Their eyes darted from the observation window to the control panels, their hands trembling as they tried to make sense of the impossible. Some shouted orders, others scrambled to activate the station's defense systems, but nothing worked. The station's weapons, designed to ward off enemy attacks, were useless against the overwhelming force that was bearing down upon them. Captain Carter's mind snapped back to the present. The voice of Commander Xelgar had echoed through the intercom, warning of an attack, but the fear in the commander's voice had been palpable. There was no sign of any enemy ship or fleet, nothing visible in the vast, empty space. It was as if the very fabric of the galaxy had been torn open, and something from beyond had come to claim them all. In the distance, something massive was taking shape, barely visible through the thick darkness. At first, it was little more than a silhouette, but as the dark mass grew closer, it became clear. It was a ship. But not just any ship. This was unlike anything Captain Carter had ever seen or even heard of. The ship was huge, its outline monstrous and twisted. It appeared to be made of dark, jagged metal that shimmered with an otherworldly glow, as though it had been forged in a place beyond space and time. Its surface was covered in strange markings, runes or symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The closer it came, the more unnerving it became, as if the very air around it was thickening, becoming suffocating. "Get me a visual," one of the guards shouted to a technician, who scrambled to activate the station's cameras. On the screen, the monster ship loomed larger, blocking out the remaining light from the stars. It moved slowly, but its sheer size made it feel as though time itself had stopped. There was no sound, no warning. It was simply there, a ghost ship drifting toward them from the heart of the dark void. "We need to alert the council," another guard shouted, his voice cracking with fear. But Captain Carter had no intention of waiting for instructions. His mind was racing. He had a strange, gut-wrenching feeling that this ship wasn't just here for the station. It was here for him. The darkness that had swallowed the stars wasn't an ordinary space anomaly or a natural phenomenon. It was the beginning of something much worse. As the ship inched closer, Captain Carter could feel a pressure building in the air, an oppressive weight that made it hard to breathe. The temperature in the station dropped suddenly, and his breath turned to mist in front of him. The unnatural cold felt like a living thing, wrapping itself around his body, making his skin crawl. The station's lights flickered and then went out entirely, plunging the entire complex into darkness. The emergency lights kicked in, casting a dim red glow over the walls. But the darkness outside, that suffocating void, seemed to press against the station, threatening to swallow them whole. And then it happened. A strange, chilling hum filled the room. It wasn't a sound that could be made by any technology or ship. It was more like a vibration in the very air itself, deep and resonant. It reverberated through the station's walls, shaking the floor beneath their feet. Captain Carter felt it in his bones, the low-frequency hum gnawing at the edges of his mind, making his thoughts feel clouded. "Captain, what do we do?" a guard asked, his voice barely a whisper. Carter stood still, his mind working furiously to process the events unfolding before him. This wasn't an ordinary enemy. This was something beyond anything humanity, or any species in the galaxy, could have prepared for. Then, as though responding to his thoughts, the ship's silhouette shifted. A shape began to emerge from the vessel, an enormous tendril of dark energy that snaked out into space. It seemed alive, writhing and pulsating like a living, breathing creature. The tendril reached out, curling toward the station with terrifying speed. The guard screamed in panic and backed away from the window. The tendril seemed to stretch out toward them, its end breaking through the glass with an ease that made Carter's stomach twist. The glass shattered in an instant, and the tendril made contact with the station's walls, sending a violent shudder through the entire structure. "Move! Get to the escape pods!" another guard screamed, already rushing toward the nearest exit. But it was too late. The energy tendril began to pulse, and Captain Carter felt the full force of its power crash into him like a wave. His knees buckled, and he struggled to stay on his feet as the world around him spun. The walls of the station groaned, and an explosive force shattered a section of the outer wall. The room was filled with the sound of screaming alarms and the blaring of emergency signals as the station's gravity systems began to fail. Crew members who had been too slow to escape were now floating helplessly in the zero gravity, drifting toward the widening hole in the station's hull. Carter pushed himself forward, his mind still reeling. The alien ship wasn't just attacking. It was tearing the station apart, using the dark energy tendrils to unravel it from the inside out. It was as if the station itself was being consumed, reduced to nothing more than debris. But the ship wasn't finished. No, this was only the beginning. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the station's intercom, filling the chamber with a chilling calmness. "Human," the voice said, each syllable like a command from a distant, ancient power. "You have been judged. You are the key to the galaxy's salvation or its doom." Captain Carter's heart skipped a beat. There was no mistake now. This was no simple enemy. Whatever this was, it was here for him, and for humanity. With the station rapidly falling apart around him, Carter realized that the war had already begun, and it was a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The darkness had come, and nothing, no one, was safe. As the tendrils of the ghost ship closed in around him, he understood one painful truth. Earth's fight for survival was only just beginning. The station was in chaos. Captain Elias Carter stumbled through the corridors, barely managing to keep his footing as the walls buckled under the strain of the dark energy tendrils. Crew members were floating helplessly in zero gravity, desperately trying to make their way to escape pods, but the emergency evacuation system was failing. The ship's once pristine halls were now a labyrinth of shattered glass, twisted metal, and flickering lights. Carter's mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. The alien ship, whatever it was, had not just attacked. It had torn into the heart of the station with a power beyond comprehension. The energy tendrils seemed to have a mind of their own, seeking out vital systems and ripping them apart as if the ship was searching for something. The vessel wasn't just here to destroy. It was after something. And that something was him. His thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash as another energy tendril ripped through the wall beside him. The air grew colder, and Carter could feel the pressure in his chest, as if the very atmosphere was being sucked out of the station. He gasped for breath as he fought against the pull of the vacuum. It was clear that the station wouldn't hold much longer. The dark entity outside was relentless, and its power was overwhelming. But Carter had no intention of simply giving up. His eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, that might give him a way out. The escape pods were located on the lower levels, but those areas had already been breached. He had to find another way. Suddenly, a sharp voice crackled through the intercom. It was Commander Selger, the head of the Galactic Fleet's emergency response team. "Captain Carter, come in. We need you to..." The transmission was cut off by a loud explosion, followed by a series of frantic shouts. The connection was lost, and Carter was left in stunned silence. It seemed that the entire station was descending into madness, with no one able to control the chaos. But even in the midst of the destruction, one thing was clear: the real battle was only beginning. Carter's mind snapped back to the alien ship. He had to figure out why it was here, why it had targeted the station, and most importantly, why it had chosen him. The voice he had heard earlier, the one that had spoken through the station's intercom, had mentioned something about being the key to the galaxy's salvation or its doom. That meant there was something about him, something in his past, that made him important to the alien force. But what could it be? He needed answers, and fast. The station groaned again, another section of the outer wall breaking apart as the alien ship continued its relentless assault. Carter's head spun as he struggled to think, the pressure of the situation clouding his thoughts. There was no time to waste. If he didn't find a way out soon, he would be consumed by the very darkness that had already begun to swallow the station. Then a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. The Council. They had been the ones who had sentenced him to execution. Could they have known something about the alien ship? Was there a connection between the Council's decision and the attack? And if so, what did they know about him that he didn't? His gut twisted with suspicion. The Galactic Council had always been politically driven, concerned with power and control. They wouldn't have made such a drastic decision to execute him without a reason, especially if it had something to do with the future of the galaxy. But what could that reason be? And why had they kept him in the dark about it? Suddenly, the answer hit him. The Galactic Council had been involved with something far more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. There were whispers among certain members of the council about a powerful, ancient alien force, the very force that was now attacking the station. Could it be that they had made a deal with this entity? Had they known the consequences of their actions, or had they been blindsided as much as everyone else? Carter's blood ran cold. If the council had been involved with the alien ship, then humanity was in far greater danger than he had ever realized. He had to get to the council chambers to find answers before it was too late. With renewed determination, Carter made his way toward the heart of the station, where the council members were usually stationed. The station was in a state of total chaos, but the deeper he went into the structure, the clearer it became that the council chambers were protected by more than just basic security measures. The higher-ranking members of the Galactic Council had their own private guard, and they weren't about to let anyone, even someone as high-ranking as Captain Carter, get too close. But Carter wasn't going to stop. Not now, not when the galaxy itself was on the line. He ducked into a maintenance shaft, using it as a shortcut to the council chambers. As he crawled through the narrow, dimly lit passage, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for him to make a mistake. But he pushed that thought aside. He couldn't afford to be distracted. Finally, he reached the access point to the council chambers. The door was locked, but Carter wasn't about to let that stop him. He drew a small explosive charge from his belt, placing it carefully on the door's control panel. With a quick press of a button, the charge detonated, sending the door flying open with a loud crash. He rushed inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The council chamber was dark, the lights flickering as the station's power systems failed. But there in the center of the room sat the council members, their faces grim and unyielding. Before they could react, Carter shouted, "What did you do? What do you know about the alien ship? Why is it after me?" The council members exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a tall, elderly man with pale skin, stood slowly. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable hint of fear in his eyes. "You don't understand, Captain," he said. "We had no choice. We didn't know it would come to this." "What do you mean?" Carter demanded. The man hesitated before speaking again, his voice barely above a whisper. "We made a deal with the ship's creators. They promised us power beyond anything we could imagine. But they come for their payment, and now it's too late." Carter's mind reeled. The council had made a deal with the alien force, and now the entire galaxy was going to pay the price. The darkness outside grew closer, and the station continued to shake under the pressure of the alien assault. Carter realized that the true war had just begun. But the real question now was, would humanity survive the consequences of the Council's decisions? The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, and the truth was more terrifying than anyone could have ever imagined. Carter stood in the Council chamber, the weight of the truth pressing down on him like 1,000 tons. The Council had made a deal with the alien force, a deal that was now unraveling, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. The dark entity outside was no mere invader. It was a harbinger, an ancient power that had come to collect on its promises. And humanity was caught in the middle of a war it hadn't even known was coming. The elderly council member who had spoken of the deal now looked at Carter with a mix of guilt and fear. "We thought we could control it, Captain. We thought we could control them." "But you didn't," Carter snapped, his anger rising. "You sold us out. You played with forces you didn't understand. Now the galaxy is paying the price." The council member lowered his gaze, unable to meet Carter's eyes. The others, once powerful and confident, now sat in silence, their faces drained of color. It was clear that they realized the magnitude of their mistake, but it was too late to undo the damage. Suddenly, the ground shook violently as another massive explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered once more, and Carter could hear the groaning of the structure as it fought to stay intact. The alien ship outside wasn't just attacking. It was tearing the station apart, piece by piece. Carter clenched his fists. He had no time for their regrets. The Council had sealed humanity's fate, but he refused to let it end like this. He turned on his heels and rushed toward the door, his mind racing with thoughts of how to stop this nightmare. The Council was responsible for this, but it was now his responsibility to ensure that humanity survived. "You can stay here and wait for your end," Carter said over his shoulder, his voice cold. "But I'm not going down without a fight." He didn't wait for their response. There was nothing left to say. He needed to act before it was too late. As Carter made his way through the station's crumbling hallways, his thoughts went back to the alien ship. What did they want from humanity? Why had they chosen now to come? And most importantly, what had they done to the Council members? What terrible power did they hold? The answers were just out of reach, but Carter wasn't going to let that stop him. The station was a labyrinth of debris, fire, and twisted metal, but he had to push forward. He knew there was only one place left to go, the control room. If he could reach the main communication center, he might be able to send a distress signal to the fleet, or better yet, find a way to communicate directly with the alien ship. If he could just make contact, perhaps he could stop the war before it began. As Carter sprinted through the station, he could hear the distant screams of his crew. They were trapped, just like him. The escape pods were useless. The station was too far gone. But there was one last chance: the central defense system. The station had a self-destruct mechanism, a last resort option meant to ensure that no hostile force could take control of the station. But he didn't want to destroy the station. He needed answers, and he was going to get them, no matter what. The corridor ahead of him was blocked by a large piece of metal, but Carter didn't slow down. He dove through the opening, his body slamming against the hard floor as he skidded to a stop just inches from the wall. He quickly regained his footing and continued running. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Carter reached the central control room. It was eerily quiet, the hum of the station's power systems the only sound. He rushed to the console, his hands flying over the controls as he worked to access the communication system. The screen flickered to life, but the image that appeared wasn't one of hope. It was a transmission from the alien ship. The figure on the screen was like nothing Carter had ever seen before. Its face was obscured by a dark hood, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The voice that echoed through the control room was chilling. "You have come far, Captain Carter. Farther than any of your kind ever imagined," the voice said, its tone cold and mechanical. "But it is too late. Your fate is sealed." Carter's heart raced as he fought to keep his composure. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "What do you want from us?" The figure tilted its head, as if studying him. "We came for what was promised, the pact made long ago by the ones who thought they could control us. But they were fools, and now they will pay the price. As will you." Carter gritted his teeth, his mind spinning. "The Council, they made a deal with you, didn't they? You came because of them." The figure's laugh was like ice scraping across metal. "Yes, the Council's greed and desperation called us to this galaxy. But we are not interested in petty politics. We came for something far greater." The screen flickered, and the figure's image changed, revealing a strange symbol, the same symbol that had been found in ancient texts across the galaxy. It was the mark of the Elders, the forgotten race that had once ruled the stars, before disappearing into the depths of time. "They were the ones who sought to use us," the figure continued. "And now you will witness the consequences of their betrayal." Carter's breath caught in his throat. The Elders, the ancient race that had once been thought extinct. They weren't just invaders, they were a force of nature, older than the galaxy itself. And they were here to reclaim what they believed was theirs. The room seemed to darken, the air growing colder. The station was dying, and so was humanity's chance to stop the oncoming storm. But Carter wasn't finished yet. There was one last thing he could do. One final chance to prevent the galaxy from falling into darkness. "We're not finished yet," Carter said, his voice low and determined. "We'll fight. We'll fight until the end." The figure on the screen remained silent for a long moment, as if considering his words. Finally, it spoke again. "Then prepare yourself, Captain Carter. You will learn the true meaning of war and your place in the universe. The screen went black, and the station was silent once more. But the war was only just beginning, and humanity's last stand had begun. The silence in the control room was deafening, the only sound the rapid beating of Carter's heart. His hands were still trembling as he stared at the now blank screen, the words of the elders echoing in his mind. The galaxy was on the edge of annihilation, and he had to act. Now. Time was running out. He turned quickly, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. The walls were cracked, the lights flickering intermittently, casting eerie shadows. The alien ship outside had begun to deploy smaller craft, their sleek, ominous shapes darting through space like predators hunting their prey. They were here, and they weren't leaving without what they came for. Carter ran his hand over the control panel, trying to find any way to communicate with the fleet. But the system was down. The station's defenses were failing, and without help, there was no way they could hold off the alien forces. The only option left was to use the self-destruct sequence, the one thing the elders couldn't control. But Carter wasn't ready to give up yet. As he stood there thinking, the voice crackled through his earpiece. It was Lieutenant Ramirez, one of the few surviving officers. "Captain, we've lost contact with most of the fleet. The council stations are under attack, and the aliens are advancing on every front. What do we do?" Carter's jaw clenched. "Hold your position for now, Lieutenant. We still have a chance." He didn't know if that was true, but he wasn't about to give up without a fight. He pulled up a holographic map of the station and began to calculate the odds. The alien forces were advancing from multiple angles. But the station wasn't their only target. The elders were after something more, something deeper, something that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The symbol they had shown him, the symbol of the elders, wasn't just a mark of an ancient race. It was a key, a map pointing to something hidden within the station itself. And Carter knew that if he could find it before the elders did, humanity might just have a chance. "Lieutenant, we need to get to the central vault. There's something there they don't want us to find. I'll meet you at the East Junction in 10 minutes. Lock down the sector and prepare for a breach." "Understood, Captain," Ramirez replied, her voice tinged with determination. "We'll hold the line as long as we can." Carter didn't waste another second. He grabbed a rifle from a nearby armory, checking its power cells and adjusting the grip. His fingers were steady now and his mind focused. The thought of the elders, their terrifying power, their relentless march through the stars, only fueled his resolve. If they wanted a fight, he would give them one they would never forget. As he made his way toward the East Junction, Carter could hear the distant sounds of battle. The station's defensive turrets were firing, but it was clear they wouldn't hold out for long. The station was being torn apart by the same force that had once ruled the galaxy, and humanity was powerless to stop it. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Ramirez and a small group of survivors. They were moving quickly, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the area for threats. "Ready to move out?" Carter asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We've been ready," Ramirez said with a grim smile. "Just point us in the right direction." Carter nodded and led them down the corridor, the air growing colder as they approached the vault. They were getting closer to whatever it was the elders wanted, closer to the heart of the station's secrets. But with every step, the danger increased. The station was collapsing under the weight of the alien assault, and the walls were shaking as if the very foundation was being ripped apart. When they reached the vault, Carter's pulse quickened. It was heavily secured, the kind of lock only the highest-ranking council members could open. But Carter wasn't about to wait for authorization. He stepped up to the massive door, his mind racing. The elders were coming for this, whatever it was, and they were getting closer by the minute. "Ramirez, cover me," Carter ordered, his voice low but firm. He stepped up to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys. The door's security system was intricate, but not unbreakable. Carter had studied these systems before. He knew exactly what to do. As the countdown began, he could hear the sounds of footsteps echoing down the corridor. The aliens were getting closer. The door's massive lock clicked open with a low mechanical groan. "Go!" Carter shouted, pushing the door open with all his strength. Inside, the vault was dark, but a faint glow illuminated a single object at the center of the room. It was a pedestal, and atop it rested a small, metallic orb, just like the one seen in the Elder's transmission. The orb radiated a strange energy, pulsating with an unnatural rhythm. Carter's heart raced. This was it, the key to everything, the artifact the Elders had been searching for. But before he could reach it, a voice echoed from the doorway. "Do you think you can stop this, Captain?" Carter turned, his eyes narrowing as he faced the figure who stepped into the room, an alien tall and cloaked in dark robes. Its eyes burned with a cold, ancient fury. The Elder had found them. "We have what you want," Carter said, standing between the orb and the alien. "But if you want it, you'll have to kill me first." The alien's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You misunderstand, human. You have no idea what you're dealing with. And now you will pay the price." The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with tension. Carter gripped his rifle, ready for the fight of his life. The alien's voice was a cold whisper, a sound that sent a chill straight down Carter's spine. The being before him was no mere invader. It was something ancient, something beyond anything he had ever imagined. Its glowing eyes seemed to pierce through him, searching, evaluating, and finding him wanting. "You have no idea what you're standing in front of," the alien said, its voice almost hypnotic. "This orb is not just a relic of the past. It is the key to unlocking power that no human can comprehend." Carter gripped his rifle tighter, his heart racing. He knew he had to keep this thing from taking the orb. It was their last hope, humanity's last hope. If the Elder got it, the galaxy would fall under its control, and humanity would be nothing more than an afterthought in the universe's grand scheme. The war would be over before it even began, and the galaxy would be lost forever. "I don't care about your power," Carter spat, his voice steady despite the growing fear inside him. "If this is what it takes to stop you, then so be it." The alien's lips curled into a sinister smile, as if amused by Carter's defiance. It took a step forward, the floor beneath its feet seeming to tremble with each movement. Carter stepped back, his eyes darting to the orb on the pedestal. He couldn't let it fall into the hands of this creature. "Your resistance is futile," the Elder continued. "Humanity was never meant to rise above its station. You are insignificant, a brief flicker in the vastness of time. And yet, here you are trying to stop what cannot be stopped." Carter's pulse quickened. The alien was right in a way. Humanity was just a small part of a much larger, older universe, but that didn't mean they couldn't fight. They'd fought for survival for centuries, and now they were fighting to save everything. "You'll learn something about humanity today," Carter said through gritted teeth. "We don't give up. We don't just roll over and die. We fight until the end." The alien's smile faltered, replaced by something colder. "Then you will die with a useless cause, Captain Carter. Your fight ends now." Without warning, the alien raised its hand and the room seemed to freeze. Carter's vision blurred as the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. He felt it pulling at his body, as if the very atmosphere were trying to crush him. The alien was using its power to control the space around him. Carter gasped for breath, struggling against the invisible force that threatened to overwhelm him. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, sluggish. The alien's power was too strong. But Carter wasn't ready to give up. Not now. His mind raced, calculating his next move. He couldn't let this thing win. He couldn't let it take the orb. With every ounce of strength, Carter reached for the nearest object, a piece of twisted metal from the damaged station, and hurled it at the alien. It was a desperate move, but it was all he had. The alien barely flinched as the metal struck its side, but it gave Carter the opening he needed. In that split second of distraction, he grabbed the orb from the pedestal and held it close to his chest. It pulsed with an intense heat, like it was alive, like it was reacting to the presence of the Elder. "You're too late," the alien hissed, its voice laced with venom. "You cannot understand the power you now hold. It will destroy you just as it has destroyed so many before you." Carter didn't respond. He didn't need to. He could feel the weight of the orb in his hands, the power radiating from it. The alien was right. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. But Carter wasn't afraid. He had faced death too many times to fear it now. What scared him was what would happen if he didn't act. He looked up at the alien, his eyes filled with resolve. "Then let it destroy me. But you're not getting this." The alien lunged forward, but Carter was faster. He activated the orb's power, unleashing a surge of energy that sent a shockwave through the room. The energy blasted the alien back, sending it crashing into the wall with a deafening roar. The station trembled once more, the walls groaning under the pressure. Carter staggered back, breathless. The power from the orb was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was as if the very fabric of reality was bending around him, the air charged with an electric hum. He could feel the alien's power still lingering in the air, but it was weakening. The orb was pushing it back, driving it out. The alien slowly rose, its face contorted in rage. "You fool," it spat. "You have no idea what you've done." "I know exactly what I've done," Carter replied, his voice steady. "I've given humanity a fighting chance." The station was falling apart around them, the walls cracked and the floors shaking violently. The Elder's ship outside was still launching attacks, but it seemed to be retreating now, as if the balance of power had shifted. "We're not done yet," Carter muttered to himself, "not by a long shot." With one final push, Carter activated the orb once more. A blinding light erupted from it, filling the room with an intensity that was almost unbearable. The alien screamed, a sound that reverberated through Carter's bones, but it was powerless against the force of the orb. It crumbled, its form disintegrating into dust as the light enveloped it. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went quiet. Carter stood in the middle of the room, panting heavily, the orb still glowing in his hands. The station around him was a wreck, but he had done it. They had done it. Humanity had fought back and won. As the lights flickered back to life and the distant sounds of battle began to die down, Carter knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The galaxy had been changed forever, but humanity had proven its worth. They weren't just survivors. They were fighters, and they would never back down. The war had begun, and humanity would stand tall.